I have this Stream Deck here, and I use this a lot when I live stream to just hit a button and be able to change shots on my video switcher here, switch between my camera and my computer, put myself in the corner. It's really awesome, really helpful for streaming. I use a piece of software to run on this called Companion. Companion replaces the default Stream Deck software that comes with the Stream Deck and allows you to control a whole bunch of different devices. It's really popular in video production. It ties into a lot of different components, including my Blackmagic Design video switcher. Now, right now I have Companion running on my laptop, but that requires my laptop to be on, available, logged in. But what you can do alternatively is run Companion on a Raspberry Pi, and I happen to have a few of those laying around. So that's what we're gonna do today, is we're gonna install Companion on this Raspberry Pi and get it hooked up to our Stream Deck. Let's go. So here on the Companion documentation, this is the Bitfocus Companion repository on GitHub. They have a whole they have a whole wiki page on running Companion on a Raspberry Pi. And they allow you to download specific images that work well with Companion. So in the Companion repository on GitHub, I'll link to that in the description, there's a wiki page on getting this set up. And they have this thing called Companion Pi, which is an image you can download and run this on your Raspberry Pi. It's already set up with what you need to do, so that makes it pretty easy. So let's download that and get that installed. So I'll download the image here, and it's about 2.6 gigabytes. Network error. Okay, the Companion Pi image isn't downloading. What do we do? We could install it ourselves. Okay, instead today we will be installing Companion on Raspberry Pi manually. Let's refer to the documentation. Manual install. Okay, I am using a Raspberry Pi 4. That's good. When running Companion Pi, the recommended mode of operation is headless. That sounds good. As such, it's recommended to use the Raspberry Pi OS Lite as your operating system. Cool. So start with a clean install of Raspberry Pi OS Lite. Let's do that. Great, we've installed this. Let's see what's in the file. Okay, so we have a disk image. So what we need to do is we need to get some sort of software so we can put this disk image onto our tiny little SD card. There's this really awesome software called Etcher. So let's go to Balena, and download that for macOS. We'll install that. And now we can use Etcher. So I'm going to take my SD card and put it in my adapter here. I have an Anchor USB-C adapter that fits multiple sizes of SD cards. It's really awesome. So I will just plug that in and we will flash from a file. So let me see if I can just drag my image in. Cool. Select target. We will select our generic USB and flash. It needs privileged access. There we go. Now we're flashing. All right, our flash is complete. So let's put it in the Pi and see what happens. Okay, so I have my Stream Deck here, and here is our Raspberry Pi. Like I said, this is a Raspberry Pi 4. So I'm just gonna take my SD card here and stick this in. And then I also have Ethernet standing by. I have HDMI so we can see what's going on if needed. I have our USB for the Stream Deck, and I have our power. Okay, we have some lights. Let's check it out. Okay, that's a good sign that our Stream Deck lit up. Let's take a look at our documentation again while this is booting and see what we need to do. So we have installed Raspberry Pi OS Lite. These instructions assume the following. Your Raspberry Pi is fully configured and ready to go. You're starting from the home directory of the current user. Don't your mileage may vary. It is recommended that you move to the home directory. Make sure apt and all installed packages are up to date. Okay, what? Okay, I think I can connect to this now with my computer now that I have this IP address. So I'll pop open iTerm. iTerm is just my terminal of choice here. I'll SSH into Pi at, what's our IP? 172.30.142.50. Okay, so I just learned a couple of different things. First off, Raspberry Pi OS Lite has SSH turned off. Why? I don't know. So we have to turn SSH on. I also just found this cool other trick to help you get your IP address of your Raspberry Pi if you can't hook it up to an HDMI interface like I have here. You can ping raspberrypi.local, and that will get you the IP address of your Raspberry Pi on your local network. So on the Raspberry Pi documentation page, we have some instructions here for enabling SSH. So I will do that directly from the Raspberry Pi. I'll plug in a keyboard and mouse. One second. Okay, I have a trusty keyboard and I have a wired mouse. Probably don't even need the mouse. I won't plug the mouse in. Okay, so by default, the username for the Raspberry Pi OS is Pi, P-I, and the password is Raspberry. So I have a prompt here. I can't make this bigger, no. I have a prompt here, and let's get SSH going. So by the documentation here, we can do sudo raspi config. Okay. And select interface options, SSH. Would you like the SSH server to be enabled? Why, yes, I would. SSH server is enabled. Great. Let's go to finish. And there we go. Cool. So now back on my Mac, switch out keyboards. Let's see if we can SSH into it now. So I should be able to do SSH Pi at that IP address. Yes, I want to continue. Password is Raspberry. And there we go. Now we're SSH'd into the Raspberry Pi. Now we can finish the directions for Companion. So we will start with their recommendation here of doing sudo apt update, sudo apt upgrade, auto clean. Okay, all of that looks good. So I'm going to copy that and run that on the Raspberry Pi. So it turns out in our install, we did need an HDMI connection to configure SSH. I'm sure there are plenty of ways to do that without having to hook up HDMI in case that doesn't work for you. But you'll have to Google around for that one. Now, when did this glare come on my camera? 1 second, let me go block out the sun. There we go. No more sun. We're still installing all the things we need on the Raspberry Pi. Excellent. All right, our next step is to install some required packages. So we have a pretty standard sudo apt-get install command here with several different packages, it looks like, for compiling. So we'll copy that and we will run that on the Pi. Okay, those packages have been installed. Now there's a note here, if you haven't already done so, when would we have done so? Make sure you install the latest version of EEPROM, update tool, blah, 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 latest version of USB controller chip. Sounds good. We'll run that too. You'll need to reboot immediately after updating this package to finalize the installation and firmware update. Sudo reboot. Alrighty, we can see that rebooting. Let me see what that looks like on our Pi. Okay, the Pi is rebooting. Okay, we got to the login prompt, I can see, so that's good to go. On to the next step. Install Node.js. We'll just use the line that they give us here to install the correct version that Companion would want. Now that we've rebooted though, we need to get back into the Raspberry Pi. So we'll run our SSH command again. Our default password's Raspberry, and we'll install the Node package. Or we'll install Node. Okay, Node's installed. Now it wants us to add a udev rule. To be honest, I don't know what a udev rule is, but we'll roll with it. So we're going to use the nano editor to go in here, and we'll just paste in this whole thing. And we'll write it out. Wrote 14 lines. Excellent. Okay. Let me cat that out just to make sure that everything's saved there. Okay, perfect. Either reboot your Raspberry Pi or reload the udev rules. We'll just reload the rules since we just rebooted. Okay, rules reloaded. Now we'll install yarn and update our path variables. Okay. Now we're ready to clone the repository and build. These commands will clone the repository. Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is clone the repository onto our Raspberry Pi. We'll clone it straight from GitHub and then looks like run it. Okay, so I'll move into the home directory. I think I'm already there. And we'll run a git clone to clone the companion directory. Great. Okay, let's go into the companion directory. We'll do a yarn update. I'm getting hungry for dinner. Whew, finally. Okay, the next step in this, it says to run tools build write file. I do actually see though that when we ran yarn update, you can see right here that it automatically ran tools / build write file for us. So we don't need to do that. The last step now is to, now that we've installed everything, compiled everything, gotten that going, we want Companion to automatically start whenever we boot up our Raspberry Pi without having to go in and type anything. So it looks like there are some instructions here on how to do that. So we'll need to create a unit file to go along with this, and thankfully they've provided everything we need here. So let's once again use Nano to create a file on a Raspberry Pi. And I'm just going to copy in everything that they have here. I will write that and quit. Okay, it says don't forget to enable the service. So we will do that here. And we'll reboot the Raspberry Pi. Okay, so we're booting our Raspberry Pi up now, and hopefully it starts up our companion service and everything we need there. Looks like it worked. Okay, so my top-down camera was my phone, and my phone just died. So I will show you here. So this is what the Stream Deck not the Stream Deck. This is what the companion interface looks like on the Stream Deck. And that has booted up for us here automatically. We didn't have to type in anything after booting our Raspberry Pi. So in case of a power outage or we just move some power around or something like that, then Companion will automatically start up. So let's go to the Companion interface on our Mac and see if we can configure it. So now that we've done everything here, we can go to the Companion interface. Now this IP address is going to be different depending on your network. So we can just use that same, I believe, Raspberry Pi.local, and that will pull it up. So this is now the companion interface running on our Raspberry Pi. You can configure it from any computer on your local network, and now you can use your Stream Deck whether or not your actual computer is on and plugged in. As long as your Raspberry Pi is there, which you can just leave it there, then you've got Companion running. So this is going to be really helpful for me in my live streams. My primary computer is a laptop, and I switch profiles to record these videos, and it may or may not be plugged in. I may or may not have Companion running. So this is going to be really nice just to tuck this Raspberry Pi away and be able to have everything I need on my Stream Deck so I can go live. Well, I hope this was helpful. This was a lot more manual than I was really planning on. There is that Companion Pi image, which will make this a little easier. You won't have to run through a lot of the steps that we did today. But if you're curious, this is how you would install Companion on a Raspberry Pi manually. So hope you had fun. I'll be using this in really all of my future live streams since I use Companion for that. So you'll know what's running behind the scenes. Hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you next time.